was the technology that they were using developed by them, or was it maybe reverse engineered from off-planet cultures technologies?
It was all of the above. DARPA, working with Parsons and the CIA, created an intelligence funnel sometime, I believe, in the mid-1960s, because they had several leading forms of time travel, including teleportation and chronovision, fully operational by 1970. We also know from the encounter between my father and I at the Lincoln Speech Site in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, on November 19th of 1863, that he had been time traveling for several years before I began to even be trained in the program. And so into that intelligence funnel, DARPA was placing all of the above, everything that would give the US government a time-space travel capability. Those would include information from ancient civilizations on Earth, the Babylonian, Egyptian, and Sumerian experiments with time travel, extraterrestrial sources from both downed UFO craft and as a result of ET Human Liaison, which was part of Project Pegasus, and then of course the information from foreign intelligence sources, which would include the Nazi German and Soviet Russian work in time travel, and of course the work of contemporary geniuses like Nikola Tesla, Fathers Ernetti and Gemelli, who were the Benedictine priests that accidentally discovered chronovision and then joined with Enrico Fermi in perfecting it. So it was really a kind of a catchpot into which they were throwing anything that would enable the US government to send people non-locally in time-space or to propagate holograms of past and future events.
Let's talk about the actual experience then. The first time you made a jump, so to speak, from one time frame to another, you were with your father, which I would think
Correct.
that there was some strategy in that. There's a certain comfort in that. And your
Right.
father had already been before you, right?
Right. They wanted to create a cadre of young Americans who would feel comfortable time traveling in adulthood, just like a child that you involve in scuba considers moving between the terrestrial and the aquatic environment as just part of everyday life. They wanted to enable us to be able to go from the present timeline that we're on to a past or future timeline effortlessly, without any anxiety, without any sense of something extraordinary going on. So I believe that that was one of the motives for my father beginning to involve me in teleportation at age 6. What happened is we left our home in Morris Plains, my dad shouting to my mom in the house that, "Hun, I'm taking Andy to the hardware store," which was not in Woodridge, New
That's
Jersey.
a code.
Yeah, which was in Florham Park, New Jersey. And instead we drove up to the Curtiss Wright Aeronautical Company facility in Woodridge, New Jersey, which also was about 15 minutes from the house. And we were cleared through security there into Building 68. And in a small laboratory in Building 68, there was a device in the front of the room. It basically consisted of two parentheses-shaped booms that were about 8 feet high, maybe about 10 feet apart from each other on the floor. And there was a technician sitting at a rudimentary computer keyboard and screen, controlling the device, setting the time-space coordinates. And then on the right side of the machine, there was a power cord that was plugged into the wall that really wasn't much larger than you would use to power a small industrial device, let's say an industrial lathe or drill press. And my dad explained that when the technician turned on the device, we would see a field of energy that when we then just took a run at that field of energy and jumped through that energy, we would find ourselves in a tunnel for several seconds. The tunnel would close, and then we would find ourselves elsewhere in the country, say on a hilly area somewhere else in the country. So what the energy that was being broadcast between the two armatures of the device, these two parentheses-shaped booms, was a form of energy that Nikola Tesla discovered that he called radiant energy, which is a form of energy that is latent and pervasive in the physical universe and has among its attributes the capacity to bend the fabric of time-space. And so when the technician turned on the device at my dad's request, what I saw between the two booms now was energy being broadcast between the two booms that looked sort of like water falling in a public water sculpture. And then when my dad had me approached the energy field, it looked like raster on a TV set, the black and white snow pattern on a TV set. And I could see that at 3-inch intervals there were little squiggles of greenish blue light that were moving back and forth across the field of raster, or radiant energy as it was, in opposite directions. So there was radiant energy, and there was something that was affecting that field of radiant energy. And we did a couple of rehearsals, and then my dad grabbed my hand, and on the count of 3, I essentially leapt into the U.S. time-space program, because when we did so, I found us moving and then seemingly not moving at all within the vortal tunnel that the radiant energy produced when it was punched into a tunnel as a result of the inertia of us physically jumping toward the field of energy. It looked kind of like the bluish-white tunnel that people describe in the near-death experience. But I noticed that when I turned my head rapidly to the left or right, I could see holograms of intervening events on other timelines flashing by.
Yes.
So it was sort of like being in an amusement park ride where you had the sensation of movement in a tunnel.
And you had no sensation of fear because this was something, your dad was there, and it was just a game almost? Or
well, actually, he said I looked terrified. He later described that I looked terrified.
Do you remember feeling terrified?
Well, I was always kind of stiffening up like a young Harry Truman would in his photographs.
Yeah.
I was never really comfortable with the experience of going through the tunnel, because the strange thing is that we were going very rapidly, but also seemingly not at all.
So let me ask you what it felt like on your physical body.
It felt like non-movement movement. It was paradoxical. I sensed that I didn't feel anything besides a slight sort of electromagnetic stimulation. And on the first jump, I could see my father's hair kind of floating around as a result of that electrostatic energy being in the tunnel, affecting something that could move, something that could be magnetized and then was free to move. We couldn't bring magnetic metals in because they would also discharge as a result of the electrostatic energy in the tunnel. But it was just rather strange. And sometimes when I would look down at the black, glassy, floor-like bottom that was almost like there was nothing beneath us. In fact, Dr. Robert Beckwith was calling this form of teleportation levitated teleportation, because you were essentially hovering in a time-space tunnel, moving elsewhere to another point on the face of our planet. But also, essentially what was going on is the rest of the universe was being wrapped around your ears. I mean, we were going, but as a result of the theory of relativity, the performance of that premise, that natural trait of the physical universe, we were really going nowhere and hovering there in the laboratory and being readjusted in time-space on the face of our planet as a result of the rest of the universe rushing past our heads. So it was kind of like, I've described how it was kind of like going through the Lincoln Tunnel without a car at 10,000 miles per hour.
Okay, that's a good description.
So
what happened? Where did you land on the other side?
Well, what would happen is we would see a small little pinprick of light in the distance, and that would suddenly get much larger, and that was the tunnel basically closing. So we were seeing a little bit of sunlight at the destination, which was always the state capitol grounds of New Mexico, in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And so the tunnel closed, and I found footfall in this sort of hilly city that my dad described, sort of the Santa Fe State Capitol grounds, where you have kind of a hodgepodge of elevations, different eras of buildings and so forth. I later learned that they used Santa Fe and a public arrival like that because they didn't want to inform anybody at the Los Alamos National Labs, where there was a Soviet spy ring, that we had achieved physical teleportation. And also, they didn't want it to become a military secret by, for example, having us arrive on military bases. So they had literally selected a kind of a secluded area of the state capitol complex there in Santa Fe for us to just pop into view.
So you and your dad popped in, and I assume others, but for the sake of this conversation, you and your dad popped into view in a public place in front of a public building?
Yes, and in fact, my arrivals just suddenly popping into view were sometimes not only witnessed, but when I went on my first of 3 major fact-finding trips to New Mexico to retrace my experiences in Project Pegasus, I asked a waitress at the Mineshaft Tavern restaurant in Madrid, New Mexico, and I said, "Did you ever hear any stories when you were growing up here of children suddenly popping into view up at the state capitol complex?" And she described how that she had been born in Santa Fe and grown up in Madrid, but that when she entered kindergarten in Santa Fe at age 5 in 1974, which was literally 2 years after I left Project Pegasus, that she heard the stories of children suddenly appearing in the state capitol complex. And I was able to say, I was one of those kids. We were in a teleportation project under DARPA, and we were physically arriving, and there was nothing extraordinary. Well, there's something extraordinary about it, but it wasn't magic. It was high technology.
So you were actually jumping in location, but not in time. You were jumping into the same time frame?
Well, initially,
yeah.
Initially, we were arriving in real time. So if we jumped through the Tesla device in Woodridge, New Jersey at 10 a.m. and got there in several seconds, it was 8 a.m. in Santa Fe, and you could see state office workers coming to work in the morning and so forth. However, after doing many jumps with my classmates who were in the project in the summer of 1970, by fall of 1970, we noticed that we would spend the whole day in New Mexico until night fell. But then when we would arrive back on the tarmac at Curtis Wright in Woodridge, New Jersey, it would be, let's say, 10:30 in the morning. So that they were adjusting the device to bring us back in time, to basically time travel to the past when we arrived on the East Coast, arrived back at our point of embarkation via Tesla teleportation. So we asked some of the facilitators there at Curtis Wright, are you putting us back in time? And they acknowledged that they were. And so we said there in fall of 70, how far back in the past can you send us? And they said, at this point, we're only sending you back 12 hours. Because you have to jump back to the past and still arrive at a time after the development of teleportation. Because as we begin to do this regularly, we don't want to strand you in the past.
Right.
And that was a limitation of physical teleportation via that device. So another thing that was occurring to control for that displacement problem was they were developing chronovisors that would propagate holograms of past and future events, where when the hologram collapsed, we were back on the stage of the device in real time. And they were also developing other forms of physical time travel, which I was involved in, including a technology called plasma confinement, where you were embedded in usually a past event rather than a future one. And with the future, of course, you can jump back through a Stargate, through a teleporter, and come home, because time travel technology defines the technical infrastructure of the future.
Yes.
But in the case of all the time travel to the past that we were doing, they were actively developing technologies where you were essentially embedded in a past event, and when that localized quantum field effect where it wore off, you then spontaneously found yourself back in the laboratory in real time.
Today on Nuevo, a story that, if true, would be the most extraordinary discovery of our times. According to 3 witnesses, teleportation to Mars is not just possible, but it is an unexpected reality that has been used for almost 30 years.
You know, how could we possibly be on Mars? And nobody would believe me if I said I'm invited to go to Mars. And there's serious technologies, and the people that are behind recruiting me have incredible technologies and a serious mission to get there.
As a 6-year-old, I first teleported with my late father, Raymond F. Basiago, who was one of the project principals. And beginning in the very beginning of the summer there of 1981, Courtney Hunt was asking me a question I really didn't want to be asked. And that question was, so tell me, do you want to go to Mars? And then in the late June of 1981, I said, why should I go? Why are you asking me to go to Mars? And he said, because the survival of human life depends on it. I'm speaking out now for 2 reasons. One is we're going to be needing this technology to save our civilization. So I think that's important a reason enough. People, I think, also have a human right, a birthright to a true telling of the natural history of the solar system that we inhabit.
Is not this dangerous for you to speak about all this?
Yes, and I've realized since the inception of my investigation I might be assassinated for carrying out my investigation of such a sensitive topic. But that's a risk that I'm willing to take. Teleportation has been used since at least around 1980 to place human personnel on Mars. Why do I know that? I know that because I participated in later activities in which that is what we were doing. When I was trained on Project Pegasus, that they were utilizing 140 American school children.
Was it dangerous for children?
Yes, it was new, dangerous, and experimental when we began teleporting. So they were actually training us to contingency plan for the possibility that we might be lost in time, which was a very fearsome thing to contemplate for those of us in the program. We were concerned about literally leaving this time and being stuck in another one. One, they wanted to test the mental and physical effects of teleportation on children. 2, they had these electro-optical devices called chronovisors that prompted moving holographic images of past and future events. The 3rd purpose is that they knew that children are exceptionally accurate in their observations, or at least they tend to be much more accurate than what adults report that they're seeing. Their perceptions are not influenced in the way that adults' perceptions are by the selection bias of what they have previously experienced. The fourth reason, and that which we were most excited about, is they told us that in adulthood we would be admitted to the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis, and that would be used as a pretext to involve us in future time travel activities, that we were being trained to become America's first cadre of chrononauts in a secret program that would run parallel to the U.S. space program.
Could Nikola Tesla's experiments been successful? We are convinced of that today. We believe it is possible to teleport a human being successfully without injury. We have proof that scientists have been working on teleportation for at least 30 years and have been successful on at least 2 occasions. The first was almost 20 years ago when a photon was teleported at a distance of 800 meters. And the second occurred in 2016 when scientists from China and Canada managed to teleport photons through fiber optics between the 2 countries. The good news is that in 2017, the same scientists in China were able to take a photon to space and use the quantum method for teleportation of the photon. However, there are reports that the United States Army has been using teleportation for a few decades now, but this has not been confirmed by the Armed Forces of America. We have heard that Army scientists have managed to teleport a fully equipped group of 9 soldiers from the United States Army Natick Soldier Systems Center, SSC, to a training site in Germany. The SSC is a military research complex installation in Natick, Massachusetts. The 9 volunteers had completed individual advanced training and were participating in experiments using the Doriot Environmental Climate Chambers at SSC when they disappeared and moments later materialized in the Hydra Sever training site in Germany, completely unharmed. The chambers can replicate any climate's environment or time zone in the world, but they had never been used in this way before. Teleportation was made famous in the Star Trek television series and movies. The Army called the process the Natick Incident, a hypothetical way of moving objects from place to place. American writer Charles Fort is reported to have coined the word Natick in 1931. Natick officials were enthusiastic about the event that promises to one day revolutionize the way in which United States troops and equipment could be moved or transported around the world. It could also ultimately make overseas bases obsolete, as forces would move from U.S. soil to remote points of conflict in the blink of an eye. Nobody is more impressed by this than I am, said Benjamin Storm, 61, who manages Natick's climate chambers. One moment he was chatting with the young soldiers, and the next they all vanished in the air. The soldiers were dressed in combat gear for the revolutionary experiment and supervised by Storm and his colleagues when they were sent from one continent to another. Photographs of the chambers from the event were captured and have been revealed by the Army. After thorough medical examinations at an Army hospital, they flew back to the United States and returned to their duties at Natick. It's one thing to see Captain Kirk or Mr. Spock do it in the movies, but it's something else when it happens to you in real life, said Kelly McCoy, one of the teleported soldiers. I felt a little tingling, and the next thing I knew, I was in Bavaria, Germany. I always wanted to visit Europe, but I thought I would go by plane. Benjamin Storm and other Natick researchers are now poring over mountains of data and research in hopes of duplicating teleportation. Meanwhile, the Army quickly established a teleportation study task force, which will be based on Natick. Leading scientists from private industry and academia from around the globe are gathering at the client chambers at SSC in Massachusetts to provide whatever help they can. According to Storm, a device similar to the flux capacitor seen in the Back to the Future movies was used during the experiment. This led to immediate speculation that the U.S. Army was also working on time travel, but it is believed that in order for time travel to work, they would have to generate 1.21 gigawatts, not a trivial feat. Storm is quoted as saying, "We are only concerned with place, not the time. This development could change the course of human history," Storm said with a gleam in his eye. This story, like Andrew Basiago's claims, could be science fiction. However, the stories could also be true. Today, it isn't possible to confirm them as authentic. Only time will tell if teleportation is possible in the 21st century.
What are we doing trying to fund teleportation when it's existed for 40 years? I'm not lying. I can give you the names of the locations we were taken to where events, time travel activities occurred. I can give you the name and describe the structure and function of the devices. I'm giving the name not only of project insiders whose names will show up in government records as a result of entering certain facilities or having security badges and so forth. I can give you the names of their friends in places like New Mexico and New Jersey who were aware of what was going on.
The question we ask is, why were children used for this experiment? We asked Andrew Basiago that question.
Nikola Tesla found a way to create an apparatus that draws radiant energy from the time-space continuum. Radiant energy is a form of energy that he discovered. It is latent and pervasive in the universe.
According to Andrew Basiago, who practices law in Portland, Oregon, his father was a scientist who worked with the CIA and was involved in teleportation experiments in the early 1960s.
My father and I first jumped through a Tesla teleporter in Building 68 at the old Curtiss-Wright Aeronautical Company facility in Woodridge, New Jersey, sometime between September of 1967 and September of 1968. We know that because we arrived in the state capitol complex in Santa Fe. The teleport would open up a tunnel in the time-space continuum. You would find yourself moving through it, and when the tunnel closed, you would find yourself elsewhere on the surface of the planet.
Andrew Basiago only traveled in the Tesla transporter when he was a child. Years later, he did it again. But on that occasion, the CIA career officer Courtney Hunt, cousin of Howard Hunt, one of the Watergate figures, would convince Andrew Basiago to participate in a teleportation program to the planet Mars.
So in July 1981, I met him at the corner of Mason and Devonshire in Chatsworth, California. In his car, we drove to the office building that is at the corner of North Sepulveda Boulevard and Imperial Boulevard, immediately southeast of the grounds of the Los Angeles International Airport. The address of that building is 999 North Sepulveda Boulevard.
Este es el 999 de North Sepulveda Boulevard. Tal y como lo señaló el señor Andrew Basiago, se trata de un edificio de 7 pisos que se encuentra a unos metros del aeropuerto de la ciudad de Los Ángeles. De acuerdo al reporte del señor Basiago, resulta difícil de creer que en este lugar se haya desarrollado la teletransportación directamente hacia el planeta Marte. Sin embargo, lo que él señaló aquí está. Este edificio es ahora propiedad de una compañía de bienes raíces que se llama Kilroy Realty. Este edificio tiene también al menos unos 30 o 40 años de haber sido construido y pues posiblemente renovado. Y de tal manera que sí corresponden los hechos a como lo señala el señor Andrew Basiago. ¿Sería posible entonces que en este lugar hubiera una especie de túnel del tiempo, un túnel dimensional que pudiera conectar y enviar a las personas hasta el planeta Marte? Usted tiene la última palabra, sin embargo la historia es por demás extraordinaria.
And Courtney Hunt was speaking to me through the telecom and saying, "Are you ready?" and so forth. And I finally grew impatient because I wanted to go to Mars. I don't like waiting for things. And I borrowed a line, I believe, that was from Alan Shepard during the space program, which was "Light this candle." Maybe it was John Glenn. But I cribbed some some wording from one of the American astronauts, and I said rather impatiently, "Light this candle." I was really growing exasperated. I couldn't tell that much was happening. All that was happening was that panels of light on the top and bottom of the elevator started blinking. And then about 10 minutes into the 20-minute journey to Mars, the entire form of this box-like elevator began to morph and crumple and reposition itself into a cylinder. And when that happened, I had to steady myself in the elevator, such as you would if you were walking through a water main. You know, you're walking in a cylindrical object, so you have to kind of steady yourself. And I saw that the ceiling had become the surface I was looking at, and I could see this sort of swirling pattern. They had opened up a vortal tunnel in the fabric of time-space, just as the teleporter did back when I was a child on Project Pegasus. And that lasted for maybe 2 to 4 minutes or so, and then it began, the cylinder, and then it began correcting itself, and then it just completely rectified its original shape. And then about 10 minutes later, as Courtney had described, the door opened, and I walked out into what looked like, if you can imagine sort of the basement of a modern sports arena, the infrastructure of that built into an existing underground cavern of an ancient civilization. There was sort of a big cave in which I could see these modern tension struts, a sort of infrastructure that had been placed inside, and the jump room itself had been placed inside this ancient cavern. I walked through what was clearly the irregular eye sockets of some kind of skull on the surface. I turned around, I could see it was a skull. I could see the rust-red terrain of Mars. I could see that Mars has a pale blue sky. I could see that, or sense rather, that Mars smelt of gunpowder, which must have been some sulfur content, at least at that location.
What is the temperature on Mars? What do they eat on Mars?
It was about 70 degrees. Now, the conventional scientific literature about Mars states either that Mars is prohibitively cold or that Mars has temperate regions that would be survivable by humans. And I turned and I saw a small human being from our civilization on Earth run up to me. And then 2 more individuals a couple years older than me, I would say they were maybe 21, 22, 23 years of age, ran up to me, two men and a woman. And I was interacting with the first individual who ran up to my location. And they were clearly human beings from Earth. They weren't Martians. They looked normal. They were speaking English.
That's one of the bases?
I think it might be a base. What we can say is that this is a detail, it's an enlargement of a segment of one of the glass tubes that have been found in various places on Mars. They seem to be artificial structures that have been built around this ribbing, and then some kind of glassine substance has been extruded across the reinforcements.
The European probe Mars Express shot these amazing photos, evidence of what appears to be artificial structures or remnants of buildings, terraces, walkways, all in disarray, demolished and ruined by history or calamity. There is some very substantial evidence that could provide meaning and credibility to the story that Andrew Basiago tells. The human figure photographed by the Spirit rover near the Gustav crater is remarkable, as we see in this panoramic shot obtained from the NASA archives. This image was taken between November 6th and 9th of 2007. This female figure was not discovered until it was found in NASA images in 2008.
That photograph has been the subject of widespread global scrutiny because it contains an anomaly that apparently looks like the figure of a human female in a blue dress on the far leftward or southward edge of the home plate plateau. The U.S. government achieved time travel 40 years ago, pardon me, and was using it to reach Mars at least no later than 30 years ago.
I think trillions of dollars are going towards a backup plan instead of the problems at hand to protect our planet, then it's obvious that it's a part of something that does not have our best interests in mind, that is manipulating people to go along with something that goes against their free will, because most of the money also goes into MK weapons, the whole 9/11 thing, the money involved in that was not spoken for before the towers fell, was invested in MK weapons.
And when they were spending those trillions of dollars in America's defense labs, they weren't just making superior forms of nuclear weapons. They were spending trillions of dollars on all manner of technologies that remain secret. Rumsfeld and Governor Richardson to step forward, and I'm asking those two to man up and tell the world the truth, and that is that they were directly involved in the project that I was on. They, as career public servants, actually distinguished public servants, certainly they can now step forward as former cabinet officers and support what I'm saying because they were direct participants in what the program achieved.
People think this is crazy. They have no idea what is going on. And only those that have been led into these sort of strange corners and experiences can speak on the matter. Or else, you know, they're paying thousands and millions and trillions of dollars to hide it.
Hold on, my dad was a great guy. Sorry. And then he said, then I want you to tell the whole world. Because what we were part of was something great. This is the future. And people deserve to know what we achieved. The time-space pioneer children were not individuals like myself. We were in the second group. The first children to teleport and literally become inhabitants of the time-space age were kids from Latin America.
Do you think it's true what is happening in Mars?
I do, and Andy is such a credible person, and so is Alfred, and I've known them now for, I think, a year or two on this sort of level of discussion, and I don't doubt for a moment anything that Andy says, and I know that he's walked on the surface of Mars.
I don't believe that it's my responsibility to convince people of the truth. I think it's my responsibility to simply stand in my truth and tell it, and so that's why I'm speaking out. And I recognize that that was a privilege, and certainly telling the story of those technical achievements because of the value that they could bring to our global civilization is more important than worrying about whether I'm going to be killed or not as a result of coming forward.
Personally is to be a truth teller, talk about my experience as realistically as I can, and say that I can't say anything for sure. Anything. But the fact that when I came out with my story, I discovered that all these other people had something to say about it, people that are very credible, people that have had their lives kind of taken away from them. You know, even somebody, you know, like Andy, who had this happen starting as a child, who lived to tell the tale, really does add a lot to what I discovered.
Is this dangerous for you to speak about all this?
Yes, and I've realized since the inception of my investigation that I might be assassinated for carrying out my investigation of such a sensitive topic. But that's a risk that I'm willing to take. I'm pursuing a cause that I'm not willing to postpone, and I believe that I will prevail at. And that is to inform the people of the world that for 40 years we've had available to us this revolutionary form of transportation that we could use to directly implement to achieve sustainability in the 21st century.
To think that there are human beings right now on Mars, people that traveled from Earth, seems irrational. And it is believed that the so-called BRAD projects of the armed forces of the U.S. are not even known to the President himself. Is it possible that the information we have presented is real? Surely, when humans arrive on Mars and can explore it, many of our questions will be answered. I am Jaime Maussan, and this is Nuevo.
Gaia presented Nuevo with Jaime Maussan.
We have a past, we have a present, and we have a future. Or, at least, is what we believe we are moving with. We did something, so this is the past. We are in the moment, in the present, that looks the most important things. And then we are always, you know, thinking about what is going to happen next, the future. Well, this is the classical idea of time, but obviously we are here to change completely this idea, or at least to offer you different approach to what is time. Approach that actually even science is talking about, but the ancient spiritual tradition, well, they all have a different idea about time. If we go to the Egyptian, if we go to the Primayas, we go to the Incas, if we go to the ancient civilization, well, there is a completely different approach to time. They have, very refined calendar, like that they are able to prevent events or to program events that are going to happen. Also, time is being described in many different cultures like a wheel that is moving, and in this movement, it brings back some opportunity, some, again, occasion that how they was happening in the past, they can happen here in the present or in the possible future. When we talk about time, well, we talk definitely about what could be the evolution of ourselves, but also of the humankind. Since the beginning, we refer to very ancient knowledge, nothing that we invented, but something that, as is called knowledge, is always the same all over the time and all over the world. So there's nothing new. We are just simply remembering something that probably we forget, or maybe we lost in many moments of what we call time. We are talking about the universe of form. Well, what is the universe of form? To be very simple, the universe of form is where we are in this moment, is where we move. It's everything that is touched by what we call forms. That's the reason why it's called universe of forms. But I'm not talking only about the planet Earth, and I'm not even talking about the solar system. I'm talking about everything that is in the different universe. Well, this is the field where the laws, 8 of them, are playing this game all together with us. And it's here that the laws are managing something that we call time. So we can imagine really like 3 circles. Well, the largest one is the real, the second one is the threshold, and then in the middle, in the center, there is the universe of form. The real is from where we came from all the souls, the human souls are coming, like a rain, penetrating the threshold, bringing the information that they need then to enter in the universe of form and then living the life that we are living. Well, it looks very simple, but let's say there is much more that we're going to discover together. Number one, why we're here, what we have to do, why we are immersed into time. Well, everything is driven by something that we call complexity. Well, no, I don't want to make things complex. I want to talk about the element that is called evolution. The reason why we're here, the reason why we might perceive a past and then a future, why we are moving so much, we are accelerating so much in our existence to live experience. The experience that life is proposing to us is because there is something that we have to achieve. This is, generally speaking, the evolution. Yes, my friend, we are here to, in a certain way, transform the matter into light. Transform the matter into energy is the process of the enlightenment that we do individually, but we do also as humankind. And how we do that? We need to do experience. But obviously, the experience that for us is more important are the ones that are directly connected to transformation. So we are living several lives, many past lives, to pass through every kind of possible experience, thanks to an element that for us is fundamental, the free will. So it's through the free will, so our personal choice, that we can do experience. And thanks to this experience, we can transform ourselves. Also not, because obviously we are also talking about something that is challenging, something that is touching the part of us that they need the transformation. Maybe the hard part, the fears, the insecurity. Well, probably this is exactly what we need to do in this life. So free will is the master of everything. The free will is something that nobody can change because it's ours. It's our, let's say, last divine power. Definitely, the free will is the last memory, the last possibility, the last chance to do all this process. And nobody can change it. And it's what our senses, they probably give us as the idea that there is a past and there is a future. Well, maybe not. Maybe there is more. Maybe there is not only the time that I'm perceiving. Maybe there are many different times, Maybe time is not even something that is moving. Maybe it is something that's simply becoming a perspective. Well, let's try to imagine something like that. And as before I talk about time as a wheel, well, why not like to imagine like into a sphere? The sphere that represents time. A sphere, a territory, one big territory where every time it's there, contemporary at the same exactly moment. Well, this is changing completely our perspective, because wait a moment. So if time is a territory, and if this sphere is containing every single time, well, then also my past life, for example, are not existing. Or, wait a moment, more than not existing, are there, contemporary at the same exactly moment. But then what is what I'm perceiving? It's really a past and a future, or is just a limitation, maybe, that my senses are giving to me? I talk about a territory, I talk about a big sphere. Well, that looks really strange, but no, it's something that it's changing, that has different characteristics inside. One of the most important characteristics that I've loved to introduce now is the idea that time, it's like a tree. Imagine a tree, a big tree with a main trunk, strong, it's powerful, but then is a tree also with many different branches. And then obviously, some of them they might be stronger, some of them they could be weaker, and so on. So what I'm trying to tell you is that actually in this time territory, there is not only one timeline, but several timelines that constantly we can take in every single moment. Let me try to explain a little bit better. What is a moment? A moment in our spiritual physics, it's something that lasts 4 seconds. And what happened in this 4 seconds? Well, in this 4 seconds, we can express our free will. But what we have in front, it's a multiple possibilities. In particular, we can imagine that in every moment, every 4 seconds, there are at least 6 different possibilities. But they are technically time branches, or as we said, time trials. It means that I'm not moving in one line. I'm moving in multiple lines. I am seeing, or I can rise the tree, but then I can take many of these different branches. And I'm not doing it just in some special occasion. No, I'm constantly moving between them. It is an approach that probably can link to what many other spiritual research are telling us, that we are not living only one reality, but multiple reality. Is it not true? Our soul, that we call the divine spark, is the origin from a divine source, is the beginning of everything. We are, let's say, containing this divine source. So the soul can live multiple experiences at the same moment. What it means? That we can be here in this physical body, but we can be, for example, in a plant. We can be, for example, in a bacteria. We can be in an animal. We can be contemporarily in many different life forms. Why? Because this is going to accelerate our process of spiritualization of the matter. I enrich myself with more experience, so I bring more information, more experience inside of me. Let's bring this concept on time. So we are not, let's say, creatures that are living only in one time, but multiple time, contemporarily, multiply at the same moment. So I'm moving. Okay, I like to imagine to be in a river. And then in this river, I can sometimes take, some little piece of the river that are going somewhere else and then come back in the main one and then take some others. But how this happen? Because for me, it's always the same thing. It's always the same time. I'm in the same place. No, it's not true. I've been already changing many time trial. But let me give you a more practical example. What about when you come back home in the evening, and you put the keys of the car on the table. And then you say, okay, so I forgot something. I have to take the car and I have to go and buy that something. Good. I come back on the table. The keys are not there. Come on, I just left it, a few minutes ago. And who took it? So you go to your wife or to your partner and say, oh, darling, where did you put the keys of the car? And she said, well, I didn't touch it, darling. And you start to be really pissed and you're starting to look around and etc. And you cannot find the car keys. So what happened? Maybe you go to the closet and say, okay, forget about it. I'm not going to buy that stuff anymore. Let me put, a jacket and I'm going for walking. You put your hands in the pocket and, oh my goodness, the car keys are in the jacket. How come? I'm sure, I was absolutely sure that I left the keys of the car on the table and then I found it in the jacket. How many times we have the feeling that we are doing something and then all of a sudden there's something, it's not the same. The situation is not the same, the feelings are not the same, but also the object sometimes are not in the same place. Or something is being changed, but physically nothing changed. It's a perception, it's an intuition sometimes, or it's just a quick thought. And because we don't want to consider ourselves mad or crazy, so we just consider that, oh, it's something strange, or I maybe just felt, differently, or it's just, one of these days. No, actually, one of these days, it's every day. Every day, we are jumping, moving from one possibility to another possibility, to one timeline to another timeline. But our perception doesn't allow us to feel what is going on. Yes, this is a mind trick. It's all rational. It's all a cause-effect. It is not that there is a past and there is a future. So past and future is linear because there is a cause-effect. Everything is linked to the fact that if I have something in my hands and I open my hands, this will fall. It's natural, it's rational, it's cause-effect. It's not like this. We're not all living, stick to these ideas. And all our educations are stick to these ideas. And if something strange is happening, oh, no, there's something wrong with you. Or there's something dangerous, or there's something negative, so don't even think about it. In the past, it was very different. When in this ancient civilization, where time was one of these important elements of their life, it was not like that. Spirituality and spiritual research, the path of the spiritualization of the matter, the path of the enlightenment, was at the core of this civilization. Everything was based on support the individual process of transformation. Yes, obviously in different levels because we are not the same. We're not achieving the same goal, but there is a common goal, a goal that is individual and a goal that is for the entire humankind. So in this society, feeling, sensation, emotion, everything that doesn't appear but we can feel, the invisible, the threshold, what is on the other side? What is the other side? The place where there are all the information, all the knowledge. Well, all of this was totally part of their existence. So what now we can call paranormal at the time was absolutely normal. Also a different approach about time. Who knows, maybe some of the civilization, they actually decided to disappear, to jump out from another parallel time. Maybe because they felt that what is going on here in this planet was not at the level to give a hope for the planet Earth. So the fact that we are educated, that we are so stick to the idea of the cause-effect, that all is rational, that there is a past and there is a future, doesn't allow our senses, our perception to perceive time and the fact that we're not moving only one time, but in several times. That is our limitation. But in some moment, well, we can have proof. We can have really example that we are not only here and now, but we are actually really moving in many here and nows, these branches that we call the time trial. So we're gonna come back to the perception, we're gonna come back to our senses, because unfortunately the senses, at least our 5 senses, are a limitation of what we perceive. Don't forget that. Everything, it's been perceived as just a little piece of what we can perceive. We are not perceiving all the different vibration of sound, for example. So what happened constantly? It happened that time, it is really like a tree with so many different possibilities. Time trial. Lead by what? We have to come back to the beginning, to why we're here, to evolve, evolution, complexity. So all of these time trial are based on possible complexity that they could be expressed. If it's a higher complexity, well, this time trial can continue. If this complexity will not stay at the same of the main timeline of the branch, we'll do what? Collapse. That's the reason why in one time trial, I left the keys on the table. But in another one, I can find it in the pocket of my jacket. So the reality, in a certain point, they come back in one. They are back in the same one, even if I took two of them. First, the one with the key on the table. Second, the one that has the key on the pocket of the jacket. Now, normally, this is happening constantly, contemporary, many times. All 4 seconds, every moment, we can take one of these different 6 branches. Every 4 seconds, constantly. But our perception doesn't allow us, or at the moment, to feel that we are moving so much. Probably also because we'll make confuse our rational side. So what happened? That this tree is creating so many different branches constantly. And some of them, they could be also stronger. They could be bigger. They could be really big branch. Actually, in the creation of different timeline, this is going to be an element that is going to be extremely significant and important for us. Creating a new timeline, creating a new possible future. Well, I don't want to anticipate, but this is going to be probably something that is going to intrigue us a lot, at least to give a better understanding of why so many things are going on in this actual time. Many other branches, no, they don't have, let's say, this enough complexity to last. So they just simply collapse in the main one. I talked before about parallel times. Well, a parallel timeline is actually the event, the possibility of one of these branches to create, let's say, complexity that is even higher from the complexity that is being created from the tree. That means that if the tree in the direction of the movement is creating more possibility to evolution, well, some of these branches, they can create even more. So they create some parallel times that are existing at the same exactly moment. So they have their process of evolution, they have their complexity, and they're keeping going in that direction. But let me just frame maybe a little bit better what is evolution and how this is being brought all over the universe of form. So in this case, we have really to separate for a moment the idea of evolution from what is the form or the body and what is, let's say, the driver of the body, what is contained by the body. Before I talk about the real, the threshold, and then the matter, the universe of form, I've been talking about this divine essence that we call divine spark, like literally an element of something that we call divinity, whatever it means now for us. And it's a divinity that is not linked to the gods and the goddess that we know on this planet. So it's something even superior. But let's imagine that we are this little piece of this divinity, a divine spark that is entering through the threshold into the matter and then is doing experience thanks to the free will. But is this experience, is this evolution done only here on the planet Earth? Well, obviously not. Evolution is done everywhere. Everywhere, it means, in many different places of our galaxies, of our planets, of our system, done on a different level. So what we are achieving here on the planet Earth is just one level, but we can imagine that it might be even better. or even lower. It doesn't matter. So it's part of a big game, the game of evolution. So now, what is what we call human? The body or the soul? So what is being contained? Obviously, in this interpretation, in this vision, well, the body is, yes, it's like a machine. You know, I've been teaching many classes, and one of my field of research is astral traveling, so the out-of-body experience. And one of the things that people are really realizing when they have their out-of-body experience is the fact that this is a wonderful, fantastic, beautiful machine. It's like a dress. It's a clothes that we are putting every single day. And for how beautiful and fantastic it is, it's just a dress. We are not the body. We are what is driving the body, what is moving the body. So let's say that this body, this form, is the one adapted in this place, this planet Earth, in this time, to do experience. But it's not the only one. Actually, even on this planet Earth, we are not talking only about us, as like with this form, with this physical body, containing a divine spark. So we can imagine that in all these different systems, galaxy, planet, and etc., well, we are using the bodies that will allow us to have experience, to live a life that can refine ourselves, that can transform ourselves, that can spiritualize more the matter. Not the body, but the soul. So when we talk about evolution, and when we talk about, you know, everything in the universe of form, we have to detach a little bit from the idea of this physical body. Otherwise, my friend, when we're gonna pass, when we're gonna die, the only thing that we are sure is that we are not taking this body with us. And it's a big relief, because it means that, one more time, we are realizing the highest point of transformation, where also the body will transform in something else. Otherwise, life will be too boring, don't you think? So it's much, much more interesting and intriguing to imagine us, you know, jumping from different bodies in different places, in different times. So this is very important to frame what we talk about evolution. But let's come back about time and about all these possibilities, because if time is the largest container that is containing every single possibility, and all these possibilities are linked to every individual, well, we can imagine how complex all of this is being based. So imagine how many billions of different possible events they can happen constantly. And which is the bond, the energy that is connecting all these events? Because we talk so many times about cause effect, and the idea that our mind is perceiving everything like a consequence. I told you before, I'm open my hands, and if I have something in my hands, this will drop off, will fall down. Maybe, or maybe not. What I'm talking about? I'm talking about the law that is really bond all these events. This is the synchronicity. Did you ever heard about it? I'm sure. Well, obviously, there might be different interpretation of what it's called synchronicity. But let's try together to give a better sense of these enormous streams of events that the time is offering for us. The synchronicity is what makes everything one. Yes, everything is linked to the others. It's not just about us. Yes, we are also bound and connect to everything and everyone. But here we are talking about the energy that makes everything in a huge field where every single element is connected with the others. So we might imagine that everything is cause-effect. No, everything is synchronicity. Everything is this invisible energy that connects everything. Now, if synchronicity is existing, what is magic? Well, all of this, it looks magic. It looks really connecting to the idea of the magician. And what is doing the magician? The magician is the one that is able to create, to make happen things that they look impossible. Is it not true? Well, where the magician is moving, is working into time. Is working into all these different possible time, in all this time trial, in the branch of the time. And what is using? Well, is using the synchronicity to do what? To attract exactly the event that the magician wants to make appear, makes to make it happen, even if it's completely out of the cause-effect. But the cause-effect is just simply our interpretation, our mind interpretation, our senses interpretation. So, all of a sudden, the magician is able to make things happen. And things are real, they're tangible. Like, you can manifest, you can maybe create an object all of a sudden from your hands. You materialize things. How is possible? Because in that case, who has the knowledge? The magician. It's working in this structure of time to attract exactly the events that, thanks to the synchronicity, is going to happen. Because if everything is there and everything is possible, so that event for sure will be manifest, but not now, but in another time. So I'm just going to pull this time right here where I need.